Thanks for joining me. You're seeing this painting at about the halfway point. This is going to be an extended video with a lot more detail of the process. I've had a lot of people saying they wanted to see videos that showed the step-by-step in more detail, so that's what this represents. And the real theme is a phrase that I coined 2 years ago of my own. I should trademark it. The mark of a favorite painting, or a FAVE, F-A-V-E, F, focal point, A, atmospheric perspective, V, values, and E, edges. Those four terms seem to coincide with every tip of every great artist of the key things that a painting must have. So in this case, the focal point obviously is Cumberland Falls. The atmospheric perspective is the mist and the way things fade into the background and kind of gray out. I'm going to soften the edges of these trees a little bit to push them back farther, and that's what's meant by atmospheric perspective. You'll see at the beginning of the video values where I work with transparent ultramarine blue and burnt sienna mixed together to kind of give a gray and a dark and allow me to lay in the darkest darks and kind of arrange all of the shapes of the painting. So that's the V, values. And then E, edges. This is really dramatically shown in this painting. You have hard edges where the rocks are, soft edges where the mist goes into the background and softens all of that. So there it is, FAVE, focal point, atmosphere, values, and edges. I hope you enjoy the day by day and detailed progress of this video. Thanks for watching. I'm Roger Snell. So values is where we start out, and that's the light and the dark. And using that mixture of transparent ultramarine blue and transparent burnt sienna, it creates kind of a neutral tone. And if I add a little more of the ultramarine blue, it makes it a little bit darker. And I just kind of play with almost a monochrome image and working in just lights and darks to be able to get the placement of everything, make sure everything fits, get the mass shapes, the large shapes. I'm not painting rocks or a waterfall or trees. I'm painting the large shapes that I see. And this makes it easier because you don't have to worry about mixing colors or getting your colors right or this or that or the other. It's the most important underpinning of a painting is the value, to get the composition and the shapes. And so that's what you see me doing here, is finding the darkest darks, and in different areas like these masses of trees, the darks within that mass. And then you'll see me do the darks in the rocks, the darkest darks there, and begin to see how everything fits and see how it looks and see how it flows. And so that's where we are at this point in the first hour on the first day as I start to lay it in. It's kind of fun. It's freeing because you can't make mistakes. If you put something in the wrong spot, you can wipe it out with a paper towel. If you need to adjust something, you can lay in more of the neutral color of paint until you get it the way you like. I'm using Winsor and Newton Artisan paints, oil paints, and also Cobra oil paints, and they're water mixable. Water and oil do mix when it comes to the chemistry of these oil paints. They really are oil, everything about them, the way they dry, the way they work, the way you mix them, just like regular oils. But the great thing is no odor from solvents or turpentine or even odorless mineral spirits. It says it's odorless, but for some reason I kind of have like an allergic reaction to it, get kind of like congested and stopped up. So all of it's with water to thin the paint or to wash the brushes. I try not to use too much water. I would much prefer to have thick paint, but not in the early stages. The first layer needs to be thin, and there's a rule of thick over thin. As you progress and as you keep going with the painting, you progressively put thicker and thicker paint. So the only time I am using a pretty good amount of water is right here in this beginning stage to keep everything thinned down, and so the next layers of paint, when I put them on thicker, will lay on top and won't crack when the oils eventually dry. So now I'm refining some of the shapes, still looking for the darks in each of the shapes, but I'm looking at smaller shapes now as I work the position and the composition and how things are going to flow. We're now in the second hour and the second day here as I progress, and I'm using what's called the Andrew Tischler, I forget what they call the angle. It's like a dagger. That's it. It's a dagger bristle. It's a large brush, but it has a point, so you can work large or work detailed. These are all my Rosemary brushes. This is considered the highest quality brush. They're handcrafted in the United Kingdom or England. There's the Tisch dagger right there in the middle. But these are the best of the best, and all the professional artists recommend them. They're not a whole lot more expensive than your typical brushes, but boy, the quality is very obvious and very noticeable. Here is where I'm mixing the grays and blues for the background, keeping that tone down. And this is the atmospheric perspective that I talked about, where you want things to appear to fade into the distance. And in this case, it's really obvious because the mist from the waterfall is creating a gray or white mist that softens the foliage in the background. The edges of the trees fade into the background, and you'll see me work on that later, where I get rid of those sharp edges of the trees and actually decided to lighten the value of the trees right close to where I'm working now. So you'll see that happen in a little bit, where I soften those edges, fade it, gray it down, blue it down a little bit where the trees stick out into the misty area. Now the fun part. The only real color of this painting is in the waterfall, the focal point. So where your attention goes, that's where the color is. That's where the great contrast is too. You see the series of rocks to the left, how dark they are and how white the waterfall is. All of those are things that attract your attention, that focus you on the focal point. So of the FAVE, we've talked about the focal point, the atmospheric perspective, and the values. And later on here, I'll show you where edges are important. Where you have soft edges, things fade together, fade back, they don't call attention. Where you have hard edges, like right here, where those dark rocks are and the light water are, a hard edge like that creates great contrast and will draw the eye. Here I'm making sure that the water is absolutely level at an important point. So I literally use a level to draw that line excuse me, across the top of the water, and make sure that that's perfectly aligned. So as I was saying with the edges, those are a way to get your attention, or to get you to focus, or to not focus, to let things slip into the background or fade back. So everything about a painting is pushing and pulling and correcting, and you put down one stroke and you need another to correct that. And it's also about relationships, how one color relates to the one next to it, or how an edge relates to two shapes, or to me it's the fun of painting and the beauty of oil, because you can wipe out and correct or go over with another layer and keep making those adjustments and keep changing those relationships and get into the details. As you see, as we get closer and closer to the end, now it's about small shapes and smaller and smaller pieces of paint to work on. I'm using the mist and that dark grayish blue, light grayish blue, to create more of that atmosphere and to soften the edges on that tree. Now I do want the tree, because it's dark, to have noticeable edges, because that pushes everything back in the grayish blue area of foliage there at the edge of the misty water spray that's going up. So that just gives you a good idea. This is after day 2, where I'm at as I quit for the day. Day 3, more color, but I want to be careful about it. I don't want too much attention to go to the trees in the background. And so I'm putting green in, but I'll blue that down a little bit and gray it down a little bit later, because as I looked at it, it was a little too bright, too saturated, too green. And so I grayed that down a little bit. Now I do want some sun coming in right here, and I do allow a brighter color in that foliage there, and that's on purpose. I do want your eye to travel along the rocks on that left foreground, and notice how I've arranged the rocks so they kind of point in toward the waterfall. But I also want you to follow in the rocks and then see that bright highlight on the green foliage there to the left, and then lead you over to the star of the show, the waterfall. And all of those are calculated decisions to make it a pleasing composition, and purposely trying to lead your eye into that painting the way I wanted, to get you to look at it the way I'd like you to. And this is where things are so much better than a photo. Original art, you can do so much more than with a photo and really make it attractive. You'll notice the people there to give scale to that painting, just little dots and little specks. And there we are. It's signed, it's done, and now it's framed. This is 11 by 14 oil on canvas. And thanks for watching. And please click like and subscribe.